Hello, this is Stephen Nojiri, and this is another Tada Genji tradition video. This video is actually going to begin a series in which we will take a deeper and more meaningful dive into the fundamental teachings of the Jingunden. So what we're going to do here is begin discussing something called Niso Daigo. And there was a video on this earlier, I believe it was video 36. And Niso Daigo, we can translate it as two phases, great liberation. If you just want to translate the kanji directly, two phase, great liberation, you can say the liberation of two phases, or the liberation in two phases, or the great comprehension of two phases, or the great realization of two phases, or great realization in two phases. You have some freedom there when you translate it into English. If you know the kanji, then it kind of just automatically translates itself in your mind. That's one of the problems when trying to translate things into English is, hey, how do I say this that best captures the meaning? But in order to so I've put multiple different ways of understanding it there, but to move forward, we're just going to refer to it by its pronunciation of Niso Daigo. So Niso Daigo is a key and fundamental teaching of the Jingunden. It's also a key and fundamental teaching of the Kusunoki tradition. So while it's debatable as to who made the teachings originally, some people say that the Jingunden created it, and then some people say, well, Kusunoki created it from Jingunden teachings. We do know that Kusunoki wrote and organized the Niso Daigo into its final form. So the basic understanding is that it is a Jingunden teaching, but then Kusunoki finalized it, sort of gave it its final concrete form, and then from there both the Kusunoki tradition and the Jingunden tradition used that finalized form. So to study Niso Daigo is to study both the Jingunden and the Kusunoki Kaden. So as I said, in video 36, I laid out the most basic understanding, basic understanding and aspects of the Niso Daigo. If you have not watched video 36, I highly suggest you stop this video and go watch video 36 first. Once you've watched video 36, then you can come back to this, because I'm only going to briefly review the material that I presented in 36, because I want to push, like I said, I want to go deeper and more meaningful into this topic. So again, if you haven't watched video 36, I suggest you go and watch it, then come back to this video. For this video, I want to explain the gate of the ears and the gate of the eyes, as well as the 16 minds more in detail. We're actually going to try to get some substantial detail in this video. I also want to compare and contrast with modern day psychology by looking at Carl Jung's personality types and the Myers-Briggs personality types method. They're similar to Niso Daigo, but they're different. They are similar and they are different. But there is some benefit in sort of comparing, contrasting between the two. Like I said, the goal of this video is the goal of going over all of this is to give you a deeper and more correct introduction to the Niso Daigo. So in the next slide, I'm going to show you a picture from a copy of the Kusunoki Kaden. And as I said in the previous video, video 36, I also showed some versions from various Kusunoki texts and various Jingunden texts. But as that was all covered in the previous video, we're not going to dwell on that now. So I'm going to go over this chart and discuss the pieces and process in more detail. Now I go in video 36, we go into some pretty good detail. So we're just going to again go over that, but we're going to dive deeper in this video. I'm also going to speak a lot, and I'm not going to write down everything that I speak, so you'll need to pay attention. Not everything is going to be written on the screen. And after that, we will then sort of go, and we're going to go over that chart, which is going to talk about all the different parts. And then at the end of the video, we're going to compare and contrast Niso Daigo briefly. It won't be a very long compare and contrast, but it'll be a brief compare and contrast to the Myers-Briggs and to Jung's method, so that the method and purpose becomes a little bit more clear to the viewer. So with that having been said, let's begin. So on your screen, you can see the chart. And in green, and I'm trying to color code this, so in green and then in red. So the green part, that is the gate of the ear. And this means it responds to societal impulse or to societal pressure. it responds to rumors and gossip. So hopefully that makes sense. Responds to, in other words, well, let's compare it to the red one, the gate of the ears. The gate of the ears responds to internal cravings and impulses. It responds to what they can touch and taste and what they can see. So, for example, somebody of the gate of the ear is more apt to have pressure from societal expectations or impulses towards fame and more susceptible to hearing gossip, things that they're hearing. Whereas people who are the gate of the eyes, they're more responsive to their internal cravings. They may not necessarily care, for example, what society says or what sort of social pressures are there. They go after more what they have the craving, the internal cravings or impulses for. And they don't exactly so much respond to things that they hear like gossip or rumors, but they respond to what they can see and taste and touch. So, for example, someone from the gate of the ear may be more responsive to rumors about something amazing, but people of the eye, they need to see it in order to really care or be moved by it. And so let's start so the gate of the ear, gate of the eye, the initial division, very important. And then we have a quote here from the Kadin. Basically, simple quote: to attack the enemy, it is impossible without going through one of these gates. This is the wondrous aspect of my military method. Through this method, I achieved all of my miraculous feats. So that quote is given because it is explaining that if you are going to attempt to follow in the footsteps of Kusunoki, you have to at least have a basic understanding and basic application of the Niso Daigo. So now moving on to this part of the chart. These are the four emotions, or you can more accurately, help you to understand it better as the four primary personality types. So the four minds, the four emotions, the four primary personality types. And remember, when we say personality type or emotion, all of these different ones, we're using, on this level, it's using elements. It's saying wind, fire, water, and earth. And then each one of those is aligned to a particular primary emotion: joy, anger, love or attachment, desire, and then stupidity or foolishness. Now, but these are, again, you may see elements or you may see heart/mind, whatever, but it is helpful to understand that we're talking about personality types. These personality types, however, are not set in stone, and you'll see this will be a big deal later when we sort of compare to Myers-Briggs. These aren't set in stone. A person can and will have traces of different elements, and they can and will change over time. Some people might remain a particular element or a particular type their entire life, but their subtype, which will be the next category, might shift around. So it's important to understand that the Niso Daigo revolves around you analyzing someone to figure out which of these types they are. But these types are not permanent. They're not set in stone. They can shift. They can change over time. Okay, so now in this blue area, these are the 12 subtypes. So they are extensions of the four main types. You have four primary types, and each primary type has 3 subtypes. So you get a total of 16 types. Some people may be very strong into a subtype, or they may have combinations of subtypes. Again, this can change over time, with sort of natural influences of someone's life, but it can also be changed by you influencing a person, right? So, but the important factor here to understand is that there are 4 primary types and there are 12 subtypes. It makes a total of 16 types. A person might be a primary type, or they may be one of the subtypes as their sort of main type or their primary type at the time. So you have to identify what type they are, and then that is how you will interact with them based on what type they are. And it's not horribly important, but let's go ahead and address why it says allies at the top and outer gate enemy at the bottom. This is just to remind you that the students of this method utilize this to support allies or to attack enemies. The method presents two approaches then. So there's attacking enemies and there's supporting allies. It also is meant to show you that allies can become enemies through this psychological process, and enemies can become allies through this process. So you have allies, you have enemies. You support your allies, you attack your enemies. You can, if you're not careful, allies can become enemies, and if you're clever, you can turn your enemies into your allies. And that's what that means. Okay, so let's recap. What we have is a process which lays out 16 minds, or 16 personality types. And with that structure, the student of the Niso Daigo can then either support someone or attack someone based on that person's type. Now, how this looks can be very deceiving because, so as I said on the screen, for example, it might look like you're helping or supporting an enemy, but you're actually using the method which attacks them. It might look like you're causing problems for an ally, but you're actually using a method which helps them, which supports them, right? So you have figured out your enemy's personality type or your ally's personality type, and your ally needs help, your enemy needs to be attacked. You used the corresponding method based on the personality type to attack or to support, but it doesn't always look like you're attacking or supporting. So like externally, to someone looking at it externally, it might look like you're supporting the enemy, but you're actually attacking them. Or it may look like you're being hard on or being like, vicious or being not very kind to your ally, but you're actually doing the thing that's going to support your ally. So it's similar it's similar, not the same, but it is similar to the idea of skillful means in Buddhism, which a person might do something that seems contrary to their goal, but it is actually the exact right thing to do in order to achieve the goal. So the lesson to take away from this slide is that you figure the personality type and then whether you're attacking or supporting. But the method, the way it looks to people on the outside, it might not look like you're attacking or supporting because each personality type has its own method to attack and its own method to support. Okay, now let's regroup again and let's start again from the top. So the gate of the ears. So let me give you a teaching from the Kaden. It says, Ashikaga Takuiji is used as an example of the gate of the ears. And the Kaden mentions that because Ashikaga was weak to fame and glory and responds to rumors and gossip, that Masashige sent monks around Kyoto to spread word that Masashige and some of his generals had died in a previous skirmish. Takuiji, being weak to the ears, took that bait and was then ambushed by Kusunoki as a result. So the lesson here is that because Takuiji is a person of the ears, he is concerned with societal opinion. He's concerned with fame. He's concerned with glory. He's also, which also in alignment with that, he's susceptible to rumors and gossip. He's susceptible to the words of people, right? He's moved by the movement of words and opinions around him. Okay, so therefore he is weak to rumors. So Masashige fights with Masashige basically spreads rumors, makes it look like everyone around you is saying that I'm dead, that Masashige died in that previous skirmish. So then Takuuji is going to be more susceptible to believing that. He's hearing it, people are talking it, this is what is becoming the societal belief, the societal norm, the societal impulse, the societal push, is that Masashige died. So then he believes it, he acts on it, he thinks, okay, well, I'm going to now move on Kyoto, and then Kusunoki Masashige beats him in ambush, gets him in an ambush, beats him, Takuuji has to flee. So that is an example of the gate of the ear, which is given in the Kaden. Now let's look. Now the Kaden also then gives an example of the gate of the eyes, it says uses Nita Yoshisada, and it says an example for the gate of the eyes. It mentions that Nita Yoshisada was weak to the eye because he loved to always mess around with beautiful women. he was weak and susceptible to sensory weakness. So Nita Yoshisada didn't really care that people were sort of talking about him behind his back, saying like, "Wow, Nita Yoshisada spends a lot of time chasing tail, and he's not he needs to like be a better general or whatever, et cetera, et cetera." People are talking, but he doesn't care because he's chasing that tail, right? Because he's a person of the gate of the eyes. He is weak to sensory impulse. He wants to see beautiful women, taste beautiful women, touch beautiful women, etc., right? So that means gate of the eyes. Now, the Kaden also says that Nita Yoshisada always wanted to kill Masashige, but Masashige, knowing that he was weak to the gate of the eyes, then always made sure Nita would see amazing displays or amazing feats, right? And when he sees Masashige doing these amazing feats, or winning these amazing skirmishes, or doing these amazing things, etc., that subdues Nita's impulse or will to actually assassinate Masashige, to go after him. Now, unfortunately, we know that Nita Yoshisada abandoned Kusunoki Masashige at the Battle of Minatogawa. But abandoning him at the battle is different than actually being the one to step forward and kill him. But unfortunately, Nita Yoshisada did abandon Masashige in the end. He abandoned him to sort of die at Minatogawa. But prior to that, Nita Yoshisada, according to the Kusunoki Ryu, according to the traditions, the traditions of the Kaden, he wanted Masashige dead from the beginning, and that's just a teaching that's throughout the Kaden. Nita Yoshisada is a villain in Kusunoki Ryu's eyes. So, but the lesson here is that he wants to kill Masashige, but Masashige displays, he sees Masashige doing these amazing things, and so because he's a person of the eyes, he's responsive to what he's seeing, and so therefore he's just backing up, and it subdues his intentions to assassinate Masashige. So now let's move on. Let's talk about now let's go over the 16 types. So the gate of the ears contains wind and fire, and the gate of the eyes gives rise to water and earth. So ears becomes wind and fire, eyes becomes water and earth, and then fire gives rise to the anger type, which is the primary, and then the sub of conceit, ego type, or fame, profit type, and the treachery types. Wind gives rise to the pleasure-seeking type, which is the primary, and then from there comes the three subs of distraction-seeking type, chatter, gossip type, and the light-hearted type. Earth gives rise to the foolish complainer type, which is the primary, and then the mistrusting type, and the resentful type, and the remorseful type, those are the three subs. And then water gives rise to the attachment type, which is the primary, and the obsession type, the sorrow type, and the fear type, which are the three subs. So each element gives rise to 4. Remember, each element is a primary and then has 3 subtypes. So each element gives rise to 4. So you get 16 total. So on your screen here, those are the 16 types. Now I'm going to take a moment here to insert this slide specifically because this is critical to understand. It's important that the viewer understand that these types are not really elemental. Okay, they are not like the Chinese elemental theory. Okay, so for starters, this is based on Buddhist elements, not the Chinese elements. But also, you're not to think about the primary types as a one-to-one match to the concept of the element itself. In other words, you're not really supposed to say, well, in my Chinese horoscope, or I have a concept of fire being this quality. So you say like, well, my Chinese horoscope, I'm fire. Or you may say, well, I have these concepts of fire, therefore I must be fire in the Niso Daigo. It's not that at all. You don't associate the concept of the element or the Chinese element type with the Niso Daigo elements. It's not the same. Again, the Niso Daigo does teach that the elements give rise to these types, but it's referring to the elements of the mind. This is a very different thing than the Chinese elements. Very different thing. And just a note, for those who are learned in Buddhist elemental teachings, this model is not based on the inner Tantra mapping, which you probably have already been able to tell. So, because in the inner tantra mapping, the arrangement's different. So this would be outer tantra and below, so to speak. So in other words, Buddhist elemental mapping, but not the inner tantra Buddhist elemental mapping. So long story short, it can be very complicated. So what I'm trying to tell you is, it's Buddhist, it's not Chinese, and it's not your typical understanding of the elements. It's the internal mental elements, which are almost like internal mind energies. Short of it, so to cut to the point, in short, don't try to conceptualize the types with Chinese elemental qualities. It's more effective if you understand the elements as code words for personality types at this point. Alright, so at this point we have 16 types that arise from a system of 1 to 2, where 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 16, right? That is, you have one mind, but you have two gates. So one mind gives rise to two gates give rise to 4 primaries, 4 primaries give rise to 16. So it's almost, it grows like that, right? 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 16. Like I said, two gates, the two gates, the external impulse and the internal impulse. That's hearing versus seeing. That's reputation versus desire. That's gossip versus something you see, right? That's your 1 to 2. And then from 2 to 4, you get your 4 primaries. You get your anger, so fire, anger, wind, joy, water, desire, earth. Earth is listed as foolish, but in the actual teaching, foolishness gets associated with greed. So even though on the chart it says, it doesn't say greed on the chart, in the actual teaching, earth and greed get aligned. So each one of the 16 types is a particular way of being. It's a type, it's a way of being, and that way of being is then either supported or attacked based on the nature of that way of being. Does this make sense? So hopefully it makes sense. And if it makes sense to you, good, because then that is the basic intro to the Niso Daigo. So now that hopefully you have a basic, and again, we didn't go into super detail, but it's enough to continue forward. Basic understanding of the Niso Daigo. Now let's go into the method of the 16 attacks. Now I had mentioned this in video 36, but we really didn't go into it. Now we'll go into it a little bit more. But at this point, even without having gone into it, hopefully you, the viewer, have already understood. You already know kind of what to expect. So the method of the 16 attacks, this is when Niso Daigo is used to attack a person. It just refers to attacking the 16 types. Each type has a certain way of being. Therefore, you attack each type differently based on the way of being. Now, this is similar, or it may seem similar. It's similar, but not to the 12 methods presented in the 6 secret teachings. But let's remember, those 12 are not based on the personality type. Rather, they are ways of dealing with the social positions and roles of people around your target. It also suggests multiple ways to attack the target's mind. So of those 12, some of them are like, well, if you want to attack the target, you need to attack this person, and then you got to attack this person, you got to manipulate this person around. So half of it is about manipulating people around the person, and then the other half is about different ways to manipulate that person. And it's kind of it's a method in which you attack the target from multiple angles. So think of multiple little hooks from multiple directions. So, and this system of 12, it does exist in the Tada Genji tradition and in the and for Kusunoki students, because both the Tada Genji tradition and the Kusunoki tradition utilize the 6 secret teachings. So the 12 methods are there. But the 12 methods is not related to Niso Daigo. The 16 method is Niso Daigo. 12 method is from 6 secret teaching. Niso Daigo, for example, it doesn't, and they're different, right? Niso Daigo seeks to not launch a generic, overly large effort to ensnare someone with, dozens of little hooks. Rather, it seeks to pinpoint the exact spot in which to apply pressure to get someone to react. So remember, this method, the Niso Daigo, especially when you're talking about like Kusunoki Ryu and the Southern Court Loyalist, it's utilized by smaller group of warriors. In many cases, small guerrilla groups, scouting groups, spy groups. They do not have the time and resource to launch massive, multi-small pronged attacks. They need to be able to strike the enemy's mind precisely and decisively and precisely. They need to. They don't have the resource, the manpower, the resource, etc., to launch just a massive multi-pronged attack. They have to hit. They get one chance to hit the target, so it has to be as accurate as possible. Thus, the method presented by Niso Daigo is one that allows a person to hit another person in exactly such a way. The target is examined for their type and then attacked from that angle. It cuts out a lot of wasted effort and a lot of lost resources. And just for the record, when supporting an ally, for example, it's the same thing. You want to address the need of the ally directly, and you don't want to waste a lot of time and resources on extraneous efforts. Alright, so let's take a moment to look at the Kusunoki Kata and what it specifically teaches in relation to this. If you remember in a previous video I talked about the original Kusunoki tradition's 7-part conspiracy plan, its espionage plan. And it taught about creating these espionage cells comprised of 7 roles. Now the Kaden specifically says that those espionage cells need to employ the Niso Daigo. It's not a theory or idea. It's explicitly stated that those espionage cells must practice Niso Daigo. In particular, the scouts and the spies need to be trained in the method because they have to be able to manipulate people in the field to get data and or move pieces around the chessboard. So and then of course, so they need to use it in the field, but of course, obviously, it has to be used by the officer of the speech and the tactician, etc., etc. So everybody needs to use it, but it does have a particular entry where it talks about the scouts using Niso Daigo out and specifically using that in the field. So as I said, cell leaders and tacticians need to also understand Niso Daigo because they have to move allies around and make sure that allies are put together in ways that strengthen each other. They got to make sure that the allies are compatible, and they have to make sure that they don't end up causing a disharmony by putting non-compatible allies together. So on one hand, you use Niso Daigo, again, like I said, to attack enemies or manipulate enemies, but you also have to use it to make sure that your allies are functioning as efficiently and effectively as possible, which again means making sure that you're matching types. So either matching types or having supportive types. If you put 2 types together that actually go against each other, then that's a tactical error. So within the Jingunden, the Niso Daigo and the 16 methods are considered the secret and highest level of the Big Dipper division of the teachings. So this means that Niso Daigo is the secret and highest level of teachings for the military methods, which means that it is espionage and advanced tactics. So the purpose of this slide is to show to you, the viewer, to explain to you that there is, within the Jingunden and the Kusunoki Kaden, espionage and Niso Daigo are inseparable. So now let's just take a minute to go over some examples, and I'm going to say this on another slide, but I'm going to give you some very simple examples because I don't want to give you anything too complicated, but I also don't want to put anything out here that's too insidious as well. So we're going to go very simple, but this will give you an introductory taste to this 16 to attacking the 16 types. So for example, for the sorrow types, you can also translate it as depressed types. The Kaden says, there is nothing to prepare here. When the time comes, simply act with force and strength and the sorrowed types will not put up any worthwhile resistance. So interestingly enough, in this example, there is nothing to do. because if the person is a sorrow, aka depression type, you just have to mow them over. So so you see on the screen, say, insert a long presentation of how crippling depression is to a person. Because if you're educated and aware of what depression is and how depression is crippling to a person, then this particular method makes perfect sense. If somebody is genuinely a depressed person, like they're a depression type, you don't have to do anything. You just mow them over. Another type is the remorseful type. So what you do here is you find out what they are remorseful about. What did they do in the past that they are holding over their own head, right? So much so that it is their personality type. They've done something which just haunts them, okay? That remorseful type, what did they do? You got to find out what it is and then leverage it over them. Leverage the piss out of them. Their inability to let go of the past allows you to constantly manipulate them. Now, that might seem cutthroat, but remember, we're talking about warfare here. So when you talk about warfare, you have two options. You can either use these psychological, almost like covert diplomatic, like diplomacy methods, or you can use all-out warfare, war of attrition, right? So you either manipulate a handful of people to rearrange the chessboard, or is wholesale slaughter of thousands of people on a battlefield. So yes, utilizing someone's remorse, leveraging that on them, manipulating that, just pressing them with the thing that haunts them to get them to do what you want them to do. Yeah, that's pretty mean. It's pretty dastardly. It's pretty cutthroat, but it might prevent a war from breaking out. Let's give another example of one of the water types, what's called the obsessive type. Or obsessive type in here can also be translated as clingy, obsessive. With modern terminology, you might almost want to say codependent, perhaps. But it says to create deeply close relationships in this person's life and then use the relationship to manipulate them, to incline them toward your influence. When setting this up, you have to determine if the person desires an intimate relationship or a deep friendship. If it's an intimate relationship, then you need to set them up with a woman. And if they're already married, you need to set them up with a mistress. And if they're in need of a close friend, then set them up with a male who is a little bit younger than they are, and then have him become the person's close friend. So, and naturally, of course, you control the woman that you set them up with. You control the young man who is their friend. So you don't just set them up with a person and then you don't know what's going on. So like if the person is needing an intimate, clingy, obsessive needing of some kind of intimate relationship, then you send a female who is your agent, who responds to you. That's your person. And then you get them super close with that person. And then through that person, you can twist and bend and pull that person however you want it to go. Consequently, if they don't want if they're not looking for that sort of like intimate relationship, but they're looking for just a close friendship, and you send a younger guy to be their close friend, that guy is your agent. He works with you. And then through him, you manipulate the person. So now these three examples that I've presented might seem kind of obvious to some of you, okay? But that's why I picked them. So full disclosure, I'm keeping the better, the juicy, or the more sinister, the more insidious methods out of the presentation. I'm not putting some of them in here specifically. I've picked these three, which are kind of the most obvious, but this is what you're getting, right? We're not going to go through all 16, and I'm not going to put stuff out there that is more than this, because if you really think about these three that I've presented, they're quite mean, right? They're quite devious. But that's the point, is you're using the methods to attack this person. So again, it's warfare. but it's not open conflict. It is psychological manipulation. All right. And again, it may seem cutthroat, but it can prevent. Now, some of you may say, well, isn't this just attacking your enemy's weakness? And I'm going to say yes, because that is all warfare ultimately is. You and another person are fighting each other, and you attack their weakness. It can be a physical weakness. It can be emotional, social weakness. You find where they're weak, you attack them, you win. And then life goes on afterwards. For you, maybe they're dead. Maybe life doesn't go on for them. But that is warfare. That is the totality of warfare. Two forces meet, one overtakes the other, the end. And that usually is not a matter of like the strongest fights the strongest at their strongest. No, it's usually like, I have a strength, you have a weakness, I use my strength to attack your weakness, I win, you lose, I continue on. And that is warfare. That is the totality of warfare in a nutshell. All right. So yes, it is just attacking your enemy's weakness. But beyond that, let's talk about the important factor here. And that is that the Niso Daigo represents, or it presents a full and complete structured method for doing so. This isn't just random guessing and random attempts based on hunches, based on, well, I don't really have any structure for this, but I'm going to try this. It's none of that. It's, like I said, it's not random guessing or random attempts based on your own limited knowledge of the human terrain. This Niso Daigo is a fully developed system that one can learn and utilize without a lot of mistakes and guesswork. It can be used to crush a person's spirit or simply manipulate them. It can be used to support an ally individually, or it can be used to arrange allies in a way that keeps harmony among the totality of your allied forces. Again, it is a structured method to navigate and manipulate, for good or for bad, the human terrain. That's the point. Now, having said all of that, as I said at the beginning of the video, let's do a little compare and contrast with sort of modern Western psychology, right? Okay. So let's look at the Niso Daigo in compare and contrast to Western systems of Myers-Briggs personality types. And of course, diving slightly into Jung's methods, naturally, because Myers-Briggs is an extension of Jung, right? So Jung laid out 32 types, but his 32 types are based on 16, which are based on 4, which is rooted in 2. So 2 to 4 to 16. Sound familiar? Right? Myers-Briggs, which developed off of Jung's work, presents an initial division of 2 and gives rise to 16. Arguably, it becomes 32 when you sort of do additional factors, but the additional factors aside, in the main, Myers-Briggs has 16 personality types. Now, I'm not going to be teaching Jung or Myers-Briggs in this video, so if you're not familiar with Jung's work or Myers-Briggs, you need to go Google and study it. I'm going to continue on this video, but I'm just going to dive into it, and I'm not going to, explain everything. The initial key feature, which I sort of want to bring up, is that all 3 systems use that initial division of 2, and it can be helpful to people new to the ideas or to the procedure of Niso Daigo. So, we have ears and eyes in Niso Daigo, but that's along the same lines as the extrovert and introvert division of the sort of Jung and Myers-Briggs. You can loosely associate the ears with the extrovert and the eyes with the introvert. It's fair. I mean, the association is not without merit. However, it's not really the same. So it's helpful for those that are new to Niso Daigo to initially sort of compare them in this way and see, because it helps to understand. But as long as you remember that ears and eyes is not extroverted and introverted. They're similar, but they are not the same. Niso Daigo is similar, but not the same as Jung or Myers-Briggs. Okay, so we have to understand that. So any similarities that we see may help some people understand Niso Daigo, but like I said, it may be helpful for people who are new to Niso Daigo to find their footing. But it is important to remember that it is not the same thing, and that any compare and contrast is more of a mental exercise and not an actuality. All right, so having said that, once we have the initial division of 2, we can move on to a division of 4. All right, so you need to look on the screen for this one. Niso Daigo's 4 primaries. Remember, earth, water, fire, wind. We've discussed them. Okay, they are the primary types born of the mind element. Right, so mind gives rise to these, right, these elements. So mind is the 1, ear and eye is the 2, and then now you have the 4 primaries. Okay, right. Myers-Briggs doesn't really have a primary 4, right? They go from 2 to 16. Their 16 is based on a system of pairs, right? But Jung did postulate a primary set of 4, even though, again, his system does have 32, also based around revolving pairs, or revolved around a set of pairs. But when we go to that initial division of 4, you have Jung's primary 4 are the introverted intuition, the extroverted intuition, the introverted sensation, and the extroverted sensation, right? So Niso Daigo and Myers-Briggs and Jung have an initial division of 2. Niso Daigo goes on to have a 4. Myers-Briggs does not. Jung does have a 4. But can we align Niso Daigo's primaries to Jung's primaries? Could possibly wind be the extroverted intuition and fire be the extroverted sensation? Or maybe we have to reverse those. Maybe earth is the introverted intuition and water is the introverted sensation. Close, kinda, but not exactly. So again, it's helpful to run this thought experiment because it helps to understand a little better. For people who are just learning about Niso Daigo, it's helpful to run this sort of mental exercise. But ultimately, in the end, they don't actually align. And I want to remind the viewer to be careful and not to cross the streams. That is, we need to remember to keep Niso Daigo and Jung separate, right? They're similar in some ways, but they are not the same. Do not mix them. Do not try to force alignments between the two. Now then we break into the system of 16, we can now move to Niso Daigo and compare and contrast to Myers-Briggs, right? Because now we're at the 16 types. So as we know, Niso Daigo has 16 types based on the type of mind, right? So each one of the types is given its own unique name based on a type of mind, or type of trait, a type of type, right? The Myers-Briggs, however, assigns the type by a pattern of 4 slots, and each slot being one of 2 possibilities. So for example, INFJ, ENFJ, ESTP, ESTJ, etc., etc., etc. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you'll need to Google it. Google Myers-Briggs and spend 20 minutes reading a basic introduction. The important part is that in Niso Daigo we have 16 types, and in Myers-Briggs we end up with 16 types. And so that's where they're similar. But the important thing here is you have to understand that they are not the result of the same process, right? Niso Daigo, they are the result of a specific emotion. But in Myers-Briggs, they are the result of a combination of 4 categories broken into 2 parts each. Now, we could try to run the mental exercise of trying to align Niso Daigo to the 16 types to the 16 Myers-Briggs types. And you would probably get some interesting results. Like some would line up perfectly, and then some would not line up at all, right? So it would work in some cases and it wouldn't work across the board. So it's an interesting exercise. It's a good exercise, but you have to remember to keep Niso Daigo separate. It is its own unique system. It's its own unique world. Okay? So again, the mental exercises are helpful for people that are new to Niso Daigo to sort of do these mental exercises, help them understand Niso Daigo more. By sort of comparing and contrasting Niso Daigo to like Myers-Briggs, you can better understand Niso Daigo. But that is if you remember not to confuse the two or try to align them in ways that they're just not meant to be aligned. And again, I'm not saying that Myers-Briggs and the Jung system are not similar to Niso Daigo. They're very similar. And they both seek to establish a mapping system of psychological types that can be interacted with and based on those types. For example, if you Google how to manipulate Myers-Briggs types, you actually get a lot of articles and videos of people doing something very similar to Niso Daigo's 16 attack method by going through the 16 Myers-Briggs types and telling you, how you can manipulate each one of the types. Interestingly enough, if you want to, Google it. It's there. But, so it is similar. It's very similar. But it is not the same thing. The systems are similar, and they're used in similar ways, but they are not the same. Niso Daigo is from the Jingunden, born of the imperial court and loyal retainers. It is a samurai tradition. Its final form was crafted by Kusunoki Masashige and used by Southern court loyalists. It has a history and a culture that is not involved, aligned, or intertwined with these Western methods at all. So, again, it's worth comparing and contrasting with Jung and Myers-Briggs. Just do not confuse them, and do not try to mix them, and do not try to make false alignments. And now let's fit this in, let's just fit this slide in here at the end. The types in Niso Daigo are somewhat fluid. So a person is usually a type, and they may stay that type their whole life if nothing significantly changes. But in Niso Daigo, they can shift types. In the Jung and the Myers-Briggs systems, those types are seen pretty much as locked in for life. Niso Daigo allows and sees more fluidity to the types. There's less permanence to the types. So, for example, in Niso Daigo, this is used for attack and support, right? In Niso Daigo, there's methods for pushing people from one type into another type, and then either attacking or supporting them once that transition has taken root. So again, in Niso Daigo, the personality types can shift. In the Western types like Myers-Briggs Jung, they're pretty much conceived of as being locked in. And since they're conceived of as being locked in place, there's not really much method towards the sort of the art of pushing them from one to another or things like that. But in Niso Daigo, there's a whole section of teaching about moving someone from one type to another type. So for example, if they are a particular personality type that you, for whatever reason, can't manipulate that type, then you got to try to shift them to a type that you can manipulate or support, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to put this in before the video's over. Alright, so to end this video, let's do a recap. Alright, the Niso Daigo is from the Jingunden and Kusunoki-ryu. Kusunoki-ryu being a branch of the Jingunden, so it's from that sort of family, from that heritage. It is a fundamental teaching of both systems. Alright, so if you don't know and you don't practice Niso Daigo, you don't know or practice Kusunoki-ryu or the Jingunden. Basically, anybody who would claim to be a Jingunden student or a Kusunoki student that doesn't know the Niso Daigo, it's a kind of an absurd claim. You can't do Kusunoki-ryu without Niso Daigo, and the Jingunden requires Niso Daigo is a fundamental teaching to both systems. So if you, the viewer, want to study Kusunoki-ryu or the Jingunden, you have to study this Niso Daigo. You have to. It is a complete system that maps and structures personality types and how to manipulate them, either to attack them or to support them. There are 16 types, and each type has their own methods. It is similar in many ways to Jung and Myers-Briggs, but it is not the same, and it is its own unique system born from Jingunden traditions. Alright, that's the end of the video. Feel free to comment in the comment section or contact me for more info if interested. Thank you. And that is it for this video. As always, these videos are meant to be brief, and they are meant to to inspire you or to give you a starting off point. The material in this video is copywritten by me, so please do not steal this material. Please do not take it. Please do not copy it. Again, I hope it inspires you. I hope that it sets you off on your own investigations and explorations.